It's a pleasure to be here this morning. We've got a pretty interesting and very senior of naval officers to join us about a topic that's very, very relevant today because a lot of young people are making choices about whether to stay Navy or not to stay Navy. I will pass to you that at least twice in my career of a while back now, I was that close to saying this is not what I want to do for a living, especially following a second department head tour as a chief engineer. I suspect there are many chief engineers who probably entertained the same temptation. I see hands going up already in the audience. But at that point, as a lieutenant with a new young mouth to feed, I made kind of a pragmatic choice. But then what really put it over the top was when the detailer called and said, "How would you like to go to command as a lieutenant?" And that kind of was the hook that took me all the way through for an additional 26, 27 years beyond that point. What I did ask the panel before we get started, and we talked previously to today, was let's not be glib, let's be candid. Too often, many of these things are all happy talk without the ability to really address the challenges and issues because they're out there. So the degree to which we can, that is our intent. As you know, in politics, there's the old adage about it's one thing to campaign, it's another thing to govern. Well, frankly, the analogy for us is it's one thing to recruit, it's another thing to retain. And it's that second challenge that we really want to talk about this morning. You remember back in the early 00s, the Secretary of Defense labeled a new statement for all of us called known and unknown unknowns. And that's exactly what many of our people face when the time comes to make a decision about whether or not they will stay Navy. What are the known unknowns and what have I not even thought about, i.e., for instance, those personal black swans that could hit you right up the side of the head without any forewarning. So this morning the intent is to take a pragmatic look at what it means to be in and to stay Navy. So it's my pleasure to introduce our panel. As soon as I do that, I'll ask each to provide some opening comments and statements, and then we'll go ahead and get over to the Q&A. So immediately on my right, your left, is Captain Kevin Kennedy, who's PERS 41. We've got Rear Admiral Chris Alexander, commander of the Surface Mine and Warfighting Development Center. On his right is Captain Lex Walker, commanding officer, Surface Warfare Officer School Command. And lastly, all the way to the other side is Captain Dave Stoner, commanding officer for the Center for Surface Combat Systems. So gentlemen, with that kickoff, why don't we go ahead and start right here with Captain Kennedy, and we'll make our way around.
Thank you very much, Admiral, and thank you to SNA for having me here today. It's a great opportunity, and it's absolutely fabulous to be back in San Diego after a hiatus over the last year. So the question is, why stay Navy? And I think we all look to how did we make that personal decision ourselves? When I remember General Zinni, who at the time was in his 31st year of service when he came to talk to my graduating class at Villanova, said that a career in the military happens while you're planning for other things. At the time, that's obviously stuck with me, and I definitely think it is true. I would say that I have been planning to get out of the Navy now for 23 years. At the time, the commitment for NROTC was 4 years. At the 2-year point, when I was making JG, my roommate and I threw a pig roast in Chicks Beach to celebrate that we were halfway done our commitment. That was 23 years ago. And it has not changed. I have multiple times throughout my career looked at what are the other options, including when I came out of Major Command. What are the other options? What is best for my family? And really what it's come down to me is the opportunity to lead sailors and now junior officers in the Navy. That is, I'd say, was 90% of my decision. The opportunity to work with the wardrooms and the crews that I've had the opportunity to work with. It was about the camaraderie of the surface force, and in particular the camaraderie of that force at sea. 90% of my decision was not financial decision. I can give you all the data on why it is a good financial decision to stay in the Navy, but that wasn't the key reason I stayed. It was the camaraderie that we have in the Navy that I don't see in the civilian workforce. And that has really been the key thing that has kept me in the Navy throughout my career.
Great, thanks, Captain. Admiral?
Yes, sir. And first of all, good morning to everyone here. Admiral Hart, thanks for hosting this. For the rest of the SNA committee, thanks for putting this on. A lot of work goes into hosting these events, and so appreciate you doing this and keeping those connections between the waterfront, senior leadership, and industry. Very, very important. Nick, great job kicking this thing off. And for the rest of my panel, Dave, Lex, Kevin, thanks for being here. I know how incredibly busy you are. First off, got to say I've got the coolest job in the Navy right now. I am the commander of the SMITIC. My sole job is to improve the tactical proficiency of the surface force. Absolutely phenomenal job. Enjoy it every day. So back to the question at hand, sort of why stay Navy? You mentioned, sir, that you had 2 separate incidents as you moved through that you seriously considered getting out of the Navy. Looking back on my career, I'd say I had 4 to 5 times where I was seriously planning about getting out. First one, plebe summer. As a midshipman, I wanted to quit. They wouldn't let me quit. I couldn't find the person to go sign up to quit. That's another story for another time. Post-Divo, I was looking to get out, but came off what I considered the coolest deployment ever. And I said, if I can keep doing that for the rest of my life, I will stay in the Navy for as long as you let me. Post-department head, I had put my letter of resignation in. And I'll come back to that story in just a second. And then post-major command, I plan to get out as well. So what kept me in post-department head, where I had put in a letter of resignation that had gone up through my chain of command, was about ready to work its way over to Surflant, is I was having a number of phone calls. I was contacting all of my friends who had already gotten out. And I talked to my best friend who had transitioned out of the Navy about 4 or 5 years before. And he was working for a large pharmaceutical company. And to this day, I can remember the phone call. And he said, hey, Chris, the grass is not necessarily greener out here. You know, it's not necessarily better on the outside. And then he went on to describe his day. And he had spent the day before in a meeting that lasted 4 to 5 hours with people that he didn't like, arguing about the color of a pill, pharmaceutical company. And there were people that wanted it to be light blue and people that wanted it to be dark blue and people that wanted it, you know, and he said it was mind-numbing and frustrating. And then I looked back on my previous 10, 11 years at that point, and I can tell you I never had a day like that. Not every day was easy, but every day was rewarding. Every day meant something. And I went home every single day with a sense of accomplishment that I didn't feel that I was ever going to be able to recreate on the outside. So that, more than anything, that sense of accomplishment, that sense of purpose, that sense of doing something with my life has kept me in the Navy for the last 28, 29 years now. So,
awesome. Hey, good morning, everyone. Like my panel mates before me, I'd like to say thank you to Admiral Hart and SNA for having us up here this morning and giving us the opportunity to engage with all of you. I only seriously considered getting out of the Navy once, and that was post-division officer, and ironically went up to SWAS, of all places, to transition out of the Navy. I'm a New York City kid. My wife is a Boston gal, and it seemed like the logical place to make that leap. But when we started to take stock of really what we were doing with our young lives at that point, I realized how much I really enjoyed and valued what we were doing inside of the Navy, that we appreciated the lifestyle. And that has been central to why I've stayed and why I've never really looked back. It has worked for my family. You know, for my wife and I, we've always appreciated that wherever we hang our hat, there's an instant family that comes along with that. As we've brought our children into the mix, they have enjoyed what it's represented. So stay Navy because I believe in what we do, and it works really well for our family.
All right, good morning, and thank you everyone for coming out, and SNA for putting on this event. So I think that I'm probably in a little bit of a different position than everybody else on the panel, and I will say that I never really seriously considered getting out of the Navy, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So this is a very personal question, right? When we get down to this, and when you're mentoring and you're talking to other people, or when you're considering this, it's a very personal matter, and you really got to think about yourself. And one of the questions that I would always ask people who are leaving my commands is, what did you learn about yourself during this tour? And especially for the first tour enlisted sailors, but even the JOs, and say, what did you learn about yourself over the last 2 years, or for enlisted sailors, many times, the last 5 years? And almost to a person, the response has something to do with, an incredible amount, or in many cases, I'm not even the same person when I arrived. And so this gets me to this decision point of the reasons you joined the Navy are various, right? I mean, they're all over the place. Maybe some people didn't have other options. Maybe some people were being encouraged to join, or to have another serious turn taken in their life, or some just felt it was a family business, whatever. Lots of reasons. Those reasons really tend to diminish when you get to that first decision point. That first decision point is really about, who am I now compared to who was I when I made that first decision? And so for me, when I came in, because I really wanted something different to do. I enlisted at 17, I actually went into DEP when I was 16, left for boot camp when I was 17. I just wanted to get out, see the world, do something different, get out of the small town. I didn't want to go to college, didn't want to go to school. That was the furthest thing from my mind. Easy recruit, right? The detailer or the recruiter calls me up and says, hey, would you like to do something different? I said, sure. He's like, well, take this NFQT test. And I said, okay, whatever that is. And I took that, and said, well, you could be a nuke, and you could work on submarines, and here's some money we'll throw at you. And oh, great, signed, I was done. But after I went to sea the first time, and your first ship is always, I think, the most special. You build closer bonds with people on your first ship than you do any time else in your career. And it's sort of that family aspect. And I said, I'm going to do this until I stop having fun, or the Navy tells me it's time to go home. And so for me, it was that personal connection. And so when I mentor people, I really get into the, why did you join, and are you the same person? And how does that fit in your decision? So I look forward to your questions and talking more about that. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, well, thank you very much. If I could remind everyone, in terms of asking questions, if you're an in-person participant, please use the QR code in your program. Just snap it. One of the reasons we're doing that is because of the COVID situation, we're not able to pass a microphone around or share a common mic. If, however, you're vocally robust and you want to get up and ask the question in person, that's perfectly okay too. And frankly, right now, with the low level of deck crawlers, et cetera, out here, it may not be a bad time to do so. So if you've got questions in the audience, please do so, certainly also online. We look forward for those questions coming in. I'm going to give a quick moment before I start a battery of questions that I hope will open up the flow. Let me start by talking about something that's in the press in the last 3 or 4 weeks. You may have read that there are 2 congressmen, Congressman Whitman from the Tidewater area, Congressman Gallagher from Wisconsin, who have put forth language in the next National Defense Authorization Act to basically split the SWO career path, i.e., we'll call them fresh air guys and engineers. Whether or not this will pass, it may just be something of a relatively minor nature to the majority of people on the Hill, and it will fall out. but it shows you, at least as a result of these two gentlemen looking back on the last 3 or 4 years, certainly in 2017 being primary, of how to fix what they perceive as a problem. And I would very much like to ask, certainly the panel, but I'd also open it up to the audience, if there are any comments one way or the other in this regard. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm not going to go around, I'll let you go ahead and decide who wants to pop first.
Yeah, so let me jump on that first. First off, we take everything that Congress says incredibly seriously. And so right now we are jumping on that issue and we're studying it and looking at different aspects of it. In many ways, and I'm going to speak from a sort of SMIDIC standpoint, and then I'll turn it over to Kevin to talk sort of more of the department head, please. From a SMIDIC standpoint, we are becoming more specialized. I've already got 4 separate WTI career paths. I've got an MIW, I've got IAMD, I've got USW, SUW, and I've got an amphib warfare specialty career path. And I don't like to use that term specialty career path, but it is where we take officers, we put them through specialized training, and then we put them into production tours to learn more and more about those fields. So we are slowly becoming more specialized from the warfighting perspective. With regard to the larger issue of whether you should take, have strictly topsiders and then strictly engineers, I am concerned. I will tell you, my time in command, I could not have done it without my time as an engineer that came as a first tour division officer. My first job in the Navy was as a damage control assistant on USS Wabash. Really dating myself right there because I think it decommed in 1993. But that tour was absolutely foundational for my rest of the time in the Navy, and I didn't do another tour in engineering after that. So I am concerned that without that foundational level engineering knowledge that you can't be an effective commanding officer. I'll turn it over to Kevin to sort of talk department head, career path piece of this.
Thank you, sir. So the 60% of the junior officers surveyed for the GAO study that you've also seen probably recently in the press desired a specialization. So that's a big number, and as the Admiral said, we're going to study that number because both we have a responsibility to Congress to do so and to the surface warfare officers. Now, we have tried specialization before, so we had the specialty career path. What we found, I think I'd say to discuss, start the entire discussion, to promote as a surface warfare officer, you have to go to sea. That is, we are a sea-going service, and we are a very sea-going designator. So what we found, the issues with the specialty career path about a decade ago was these specialties didn't have a seashore rotation associated with them that supported promotion. So people went in as a lieutenant commander and didn't promote. It became unpopular because there was not promotion opportunity. Any specialization career path that I foresee would have a similar seashore rotation to what the generalist, and I really don't like that word, generalist unrestricted line officers do now. So 4 years as a division officer, 3 years as a Cheng, go ashore, 3 years, maybe Crudez, 3 years as a Cheng on maybe a big deck, go ashore, 2 years as an N4 on a float staff. Very similar to department head, then XOCO, and then major command. That's what would provide competitiveness in a tank, a promotion tank of unrestricted line officers. Why I say I don't like the term generalization, generalist, is because we already do a great deal of specialization. We don't have a set, you are a professional engineer, a professional TAO like the Royal Navy, or you are only a Crudez or only a small boat officer, say like the ROK or Germany. But if you go to a department head tour as a first tour ops, the going in is that you're going to do a second tour ops, second tour PTO like tour. We're not going to say, hey, you were an ops for 18 to 24 months. What do you think about chief engineer? Unless you ask us to do that. It is a special request to go from something that looks topside to something that looks engineering between your first and second department head tours. The same with Crudez and Amphib. There is opportunity to cross-pollinate, but it's usually at the request of the officer. We seldomly say, hey, you did a DDG, what do you think about an LPD for your second tour? Our going in is to, at the department head level, to specialize in something that is kind of topside or something that is kind of engineering, something is kind of crude as DDG, CG, LCS, something is like Amphib, LCS, Amphib. LCS kind of have some crossover in both. So I'd say that's our going in. As we study this, and I had an opportunity to talk to the Waterfront on Monday, it seems like there is some desire, but it's really post-department head. So after I've really enjoyed my 3 years as a chief engineer, is there an opportunity for me to just stay in engineering? Now, we don't have that. That's not a set path, but there is that opportunity now. If you came to me and said, hey, I screened for XOCO or XO afloat of a CG or LPD, but what I really want to do is stay in engineering, well, I would say, okay, we'll list shift you over to CVN, LHA, LHD, OXO, or DCA, and then we have opportunities on afloat staffs and N4-like things. So the opportunities are there right now. They're not formalized, and maybe they're not formalized in the same way as the Royal Navy or ROK or Germany, and that's really what we're looking at.
I'd like to take a swing at that from a little bit of a different perspective, and it's really, is this a discussion about, do engineers need to do only engineering, or is it specialized versus generalist, right? And I agree with Kevin that I think the term generalist is really not true. I think we really have to approach, are we preparing people to be successful for the tours that we're sending them to do, right? Not making them do the same job over and over again. And so as a trainer for combat systems, we think about this a lot. The pace of technology, right, doesn't really guarantee that when you go back to sea, even if it's in a similar job, you're going to be operating the same equipment, the same baseline, facing the same mission set as you did before. Right, so I think this notion that you're going to continue to just evolve into this job and it will be everything you've experienced before is probably not true. And we see this certainly in enlisted training. Most chiefs going back to ships are not operating the same equipment that they grew up on as a seaman to an E5. It's a different baseline. It's a different hardware configuration, and so I think if we focus on how we are preparing you for the sea tour you're about to do, we're going to get a better result. And I think we are moving that direction very rapidly now, using the surface training, advanced virtual environment, STAVE. We're able to prepare people for the unique equipment that they're going to see, and I think that's going to overcome some of the ideas behind wanting to specialize only. Thanks.
And I'd just like to add, just to echo what Admiral Alexander said, if you think about command at sea being the pinnacle of what we do as a seagoing service, being in command of an exquisite warfare system, in order to fully utilize that asset, utilize that warship, you need to understand it from stem to stern and from keel to the top of the mast. And you can't do that if you don't know what everything below the waterline does for you and how it affects your ability to fight that system. So.
All right, gentlemen, let me follow up with a question that I've got from the audience. I think we covered it in the main, but there may be a nuance here or two, and I'll let you address that if you see something different. And this is from J.P. McCabe at CSG9. We've discussed the pros and cons of specialization. How can we best standardize tactical qualifications of SWOs? Is there a way to enforce tactical baselines / foundations prior to department head?
Let me jump on this one, and I'll turn it over to Lex. Yes, absolutely. We are, first off, mariner skills. In the mariner skills training that we give our officers has changed tremendously over the last 3 or 4 years. We have added courses, we've added hours, we've added buildings over here. And what that has done is freed up a lot of time at our advanced division officer course to improve our maritime warfighting training and to bring that in earlier into a career path. Specifically with the ADOC course that Lex is now running, 5-week course taught only up in Newport. It used to teach reps and sets on how to drive a ship. That class is morphing as we talk. It is turning into a maritime warfighting course with 3 weeks of it dedicated to improving the tactical skills of our officers. So very much like the department head course teaches an officer to be TAOs, well, hey, that ADOT course is now teaching an officer how to be a surface warfare coordinator. So we're bringing in that foundational level knowledge earlier. We've also completely rewritten the PQS process, and we are starting to implement a full tactical qualification program for our officers. Under our surface warfare combat training continuum, we're looking to see how can we standardize training for every single officer going to every single platform that utilizes, that understands people's knowledge, they understands people's experience, and they can map out people's aptitude to get a full-on tactical proficiency score. And I think we're just in the beginning stages of it, but we are pulling that training much, much earlier. Lex, what did I?
Admiral, I think you covered it really well, and I think what's significant about the four of us sitting up here now is that we talk all the time, and so what I'm doing in the schoolhouse up in Newport, Dave is also doing in Dahlgren, and we talk, and that feeds into what Admiral Alexander is doing, and of course, you know, Kevin Kennedy has a Manning piece to that as well, and so as we continue to evolve into more of a maritime warfare piece, all of us are looking at it to make sure that everything that we do relates to everything else. And, you know, and that, as the saying goes, everything relates to everything in the society that we're in right now. And so as we build the Mariner Skills Training Centers here in San Diego and also in Norfolk, there are going to be classified sections in those buildings that will allow us to have a more meaningful, more robust conversation about maritime warfare so that we can tackle a lot of the basics about warfighting, so that as the students transition from SEAD back into department head school, we can now have a more in-depth and deeper conversation about warfighting, that when they go off to specialty training in Dahlgren, now we continue to build and build and build to be more effective in the maritime warfare arena.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that is just, you know, there's a lot of changes that are going on in how we train TAOs and warfare coordinators across the board. And a lot of it is being driven by technology, right? So most of you here who have been to Age of Ships as an officer have gone through Dahlgren and gone through what we call the CSO course, right? And the CSO course was probably, you know, 3 to 4 months long, depending on your baseline, a lot of very technical information, and then you would go in the labs and try to do some sets and reps to add some experience to that knowledge, right? So we're doing away with the CSO course and breaking that into two, right? So we're breaking that into a 9-week TAO course and then a 6-week maintenance course, right? So if you're a STO, an EMO, an FCO, or a CSO, you're going to do that maintenance course, right? And that maintenance course is going to teach you, you know, what goes on inside the gray boxes, what's going on inside that server rack to produce that. If you're not, if you were an ops like me, or if you were a chief engineer, you know, you don't really need to understand exactly everything going on in the box. So you're going to go to the TAO course, which is now 60% lab time and 40% classroom time. So we went from having about a dozen opportunities to sit at a console, some of those as the TAO, to now close to 100 opportunities to go into the lab and to say, we just learned about this threat, we just learned about this TTP, let's go into the lab and let's see how that actually plays out. So that's happening in Dahlgren right now. And in the coming years, here in San Diego and in Norfolk, we're building some additional virtual trainers that most of the first tour department heads and a lot of the FCOs and trainos won't go to Dahlgren. They'll come to Norfolk or San Diego trainers, and they'll get that training right here on the waterfront, right? So we're pivoting away from the traditional equipment in the schoolhouses out to the waterfront. And so the experience of a TAO student in several years from now is going to be drastically different than it is today. So baseline 9 and the Flight 3 DDGs and baseline 10 when that arrives, that's how that training is going to be done. So a lot more hands-on and a lot less in the classroom.
Kevin, anything like that? Let me go ahead and good, please. Sir, good morning.
Mark, Ricky, hopefully everybody can hear me. And to the panel, I find this a very interesting and probably a very important panel in reality. And the question that you asked about engineering training and specialization between, let's say, combat systems and engineering at a different level. One thing that's concerned me for a while, and this will get to my question, I'd like to give a little more context, is are we really looking at how we optimize the surface Navy for the fight against the peer competitor? Are we at the end of the day going to have the most capable combat system and ship crew training to deliver that the fires and the warfighting capability we need? I like to call that the clean sheet. I think we look at this from many different aspects. All right. I think we look at this from many different aspects without the context of what's going to make us the best warfighting machine out there to defeat hypersonic weapons, to defeat Chinese or Russian threat. So in the context of stuff that I've seen, there's a lot of social baggage that goes with this too about whether we do both. As combat systems in particular, but engineering plants too, have become ever more complicated. And what I think has led to us, in a great extent, doing the specialization that we have. And a quick tangent, I mean, I think SNA and all of the initiatives on the combat system side, including a number on the engineering side, have been fantastic. I mean, we are so far ahead of when I retired in 2000, late 2006, retirement date 2007. I can't tell you how proud I am of that, but again, I'm not sure it's being done in the context of, are we optimizing? Because if we are, then I'd like somebody to show me that more time in fighting combat systems or more time in engineering to maximize the great use of both of those is not, in fact, an optimal way to achieve that objective.
Rick, thank you very much. Again, because of the mechanics of the way we're set up, regrettably, you will not have been heard online. So let me see if I can encapsulate the question. It basically focused on balance and training, especially vis-a-vis the peer competitor threat as opposed to potentially different things we were doing in the past. And I'll let you calibrate if I didn't get that correctly, but I think that's the nature of the question. Okay, good, thanks, Rick. Let me turn that over to the panel.
Well, let me jump on that first. And I don't know, Rick, I heard your question. Optimized is a tough word. I mean, it's tough to prove to somebody that we have optimized anything. What I can tell you is I agree with your statement that we are light years ahead of where we were in 2006, okay? What I look back as I think 2010 was sort of an interesting time in the surface Navy. And at 2010, I think our senior leadership said, holy cow, look what's happening with regard to the PRC. We need to change the way that we're doing business in order to be relevant in that high-end fight. And if you look at the weapon systems that are coming online, you look at the training that's coming online, you look at the stand-up of SMITIC, we have come a tremendously, tremendously long ways. There's a lot to peel back there. I can turn it over to Dave Stoner to talk on the hardware. I can turn it over to Lex to talk the training that he's doing. Let me just sort of talk to you in terms of what SMITIC is doing. As many of you know, SMITIC was founded in about 2013. And I will tell you, I was the EA sitting at Surf 4 when this thing kicked off. And one of the questions that Admiral Copeman asked at the time was, hey, let me see ages, capes, and limbs. And he pulled out that document. And at that point, it hadn't been updated since 1997. 17 years out of date. I'm going to look at you right now, and I'm telling you, we don't have that problem right now. Since the foundation of SMITIC, we have produced 454 WTIs, 454 officers that are trained and dedicated to developing the tactical proficiency of the surface force. And one of their lines of effort, one of their responsibilities is for maintaining the TTP. And between those 454 officers, we're keeping 140 tactical publications up to date, current, and relevant. So from that side, we have moved light years ahead. I will tell you the training that we're giving our officers, The training that we're giving our ships, whether it's basic phase, is completely different than what you went through. The advanced training that didn't exist when you were still in uniform, that's the SWATs that we do for our ships, and the COM2Xs are completely different. Real quick, and this may get a little technical, underway on Samson for COM2X. We're out there to do a IMCON drill. We get the word to set IMCON. It's followed by 27 line item modifiers. So we literally turned everything off, turned it right back on, and patted ourselves on the back for being combat ready, because we could set IMCON in a minute and a half. Fast forward just 8 years. Our ships get underway, and as part of COM2X, will operate in complete emissions control, complete emission silence for 7 or 8 days straight. We are preparing them for the high-end fight. Dave, or Lex, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think, to answer your question, absolutely, right? So the national documents that drive our strategy, that drive our policy, are crystal clear on what the threat is and where we're heading, right? We have made significant changes, and including adding a lot of planning capability into our courses, right? So understanding the threat, planning to the threat, understanding where the technical capability comes out of our systems, and then how do we apply that, right? So right now the acquisition community is in this moving towards a continuous development, continuous insertion mindset, and we follow that with a continuous training mindset. So as we make small modifications to the systems to overcome the threat or to employ some offensive capability, we're quickly rolling that into the training environment so that we're maximizing our capability. We are looking for every ounce of tactical capability out of the system because the margins are not what they used to be, right? And the trainers and the way we train now provide sets and reps to really build confidence in our competence to fight and win, right? And so those of you who may have gone over to the SEAT trainer yesterday to see what capability that brings, you understand what that is. If you haven't been over there, please see James Worley in the back. He's my dead OIC on the Waterfront here in San Diego. He'll get you in there and you'll be able to see the quality of training that we're providing is just eye-watering compared to where it was a few years ago. And it is laser focused on the threat.
I would also like to add that we are very much plugged into the fleet today. We do weekly intel briefs with our students. We also consistently engage with strike group commanders, fleet commanders, and ship COs to talk about what they're experiencing out in the fleet today so that there's a currency of information about what's being seen forward. We're also investing in individuals. You talk about being ready for the fight. As a force, we're doing warrior toughness now at boot camp, all the way up through our major commanders to talk about not only how to prepare a combat system, but how to prepare the human being to be as effective as possible in combat. So we're taking a look not only at the systems, but also at the people and the human nature of warfare that's really tough to get after as well, to try to be as comprehensive as possible about addressing the myriad threats out there.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Again, anytime someone is so inspired and inclined, if I see that hand go up, you'll certainly get precedence, and I will make sure that I listen carefully and try to summarize your question as best I can. But let me turn it back a little bit more to the human relations and the cultural side of business. And I have a question, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Kyle Craig or Craigie, based on the data we have to date, what are the top few reasons people get out? And what are we doing to remedy that, if we can at all?
Top reasons people are getting out. Most of the time, I have a common theme in resignations. I really enjoyed my time in the Navy, but it is not the way I want to be a mother or a father. The amount of time a career in the Navy would demand is not how I want to be a mother or a father. And the other portion of that theme usually is I don't want the Navy to change. in that specific portion. So it's not the quality of life on the ship being the biggest factor in that determination. It's just the amount of time spent away from home. That is a hard one to get over because we are a seagoing service and we go to sea in defense of the nation, and we do it a lot. So we want the quality of life when you are home to be as good as possible, and I think there's a lot of things we can do there. But when it comes to going to sea, we will continue to go to sea. And that's probably the number one dissatisfier, or I would even say number one reality of resignations. We may hear it from women more than we hear it from men, but I would say that family planning is a question I get from all officers. Admiral Alexander and I talked to the first class mids last February, and I received that question from a male first class midshipman. What is the path to family planning for me? I think the thing we've done and are doing is setting out a path where you really can have a path to, as I say, 2.1 children by the time you're 36, 37 years old in the surface Navy. And I tongue-in-cheek say that, I have a poem for that. Post-divo, find a spouse. Post-department head, 2.1 kids and a dog. I say that kiddingly, but that is a real path, and that is not something that the other communities have. There is not a path in aviation to do the things the aviation community wants you to do, and have, as a woman, have children and stay on that path, because what they want you to do, go to the cockpit, come off of your sea tour, go back to the cockpit and train, go to a ship for your disassociated sea tour, go back and to be a department head, and now you can see you're quickly at 40, almost through a 20-year career, and you really haven't had meaningful shore duty for family planning. So I think that's the number one thing we are doing, is looking at a viable path for family planning for our officers, male and female. From there, actually the responses are very positive on the other changes we made in the community. I think we have some self-talk. We talked about this over the last few days. We have some self-talk issues because I get it from midshipmen. I still get from midshipmen. You go to Naval Land, they'll still say, oh, I don't want to be a SWO because it's a zero defect mentality. It's stab, stab, look, stab. Where are you getting this from? Your sole experience in the Navy is plebe summer and a half a semester, and you already think that the SWO community is a zero defect mentality. If it was a zero defect mentality, I certainly would not be here today. Yeah. There is no doubt. And my experience with other communities is we are a more user-friendly community than aviation or submarines. My last two deployments were on the aircraft carrier. It was, the squadrons are not kinder or gentler to the lieutenant pilots. I think it is a great time to be a SWO. I think that we do go to sea, and that is a impediment for some people staying in the Navy, and I don't see, and I think it will remain being an impediment.
So
No, go ahead.
so the question I think out there is, do we have a retention problem in the SWO community? And Kevin has the numbers, and I'll turn it back over to him to talk the numbers. From my perspective, I didn't see it. So before this job, CEO of SWAS, and one of the things we monitor pretty closely is the number of department heads, the number of students showing up as department heads. I think we were putting through about 60 to 70 more department heads per year than we were in 1999. And what's more, in 1999, when I looked at my class, I think there were 60 other students in there at the time, and I looked to the left and I looked to the right, a good third of that class was LDOs. And we had to go out and draft LDOs to fill in the SWO department heads because we couldn't retain those department heads in sufficient numbers. When I was heading out to the fleet, and the notional department head timeline is you do 18 months and 18 months, I relieved a guy who had done 44 months on the ship because they couldn't get him a relief. Those problems are so far past us. our department heads are doing 18 and 18 almost to a person. I mean, I'm sure there are some individual cases where people go a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. So I don't see us having a retention problem. I don't see us not being able to produce the correct number of XOs and COs to go back and serve in those positions. And if you ever have a chance to sit on an XO or CO board and you look at the quality of people that we're putting into those positions, it is absolutely amazing. I sat on a recent board, and not to talk any specifics, but there were people that did not get selected that would have been hands down easily selected during my year group. And I can say without any doubt whatsoever, if I had to compete against the people that we're putting in those boards right now, I would not be sitting in this chair because I never would have screened for command. So I don't see the retention problems. Kevin?
So, two of the line of efforts in the GAO study, so were retention focused. Retention overall and retention of women in particular. So first off, I always want to do better. I want to do better in retention overall, and I want to see retention across any demographic, any group you can think of, ambib, crude as diverse, not diverse, women, men, to be about the same. But do we have a retention problem? No, or at least in comparison to what? Retention is better today than it has ever been in my entire career. Retention for women is better today than it's ever been in my entire career. And over the last 10 years, women have closed the gap between male and female retention. Women have increased in retention greater than men have increased in retention over the last a decade. If you look in the GAO study, it looks at the last 25 years and kind of data in aggregate. However, if you look at, say, the year groups 94 to 99 and compare them to the last 5 year groups, there's a big change in retention for women. It's about 7% better, and in men about 5% better. So these are all good news stories of retention in the surface fleet. And in comparison to what? Who should we compare our retention to? We're not going to keep 100% of the people who graduate from the Naval Academy, nor do we want to. Right? Some people are going to go and do other great things in the Navy. About 17% of our officers go and do other great things in the Navy. It's important for us to have intelligence officers and cryptologist officers who understand the surface fleet. That is important. It's a cost on me and cost on us to train those officers, but there's a enterprise win in those officers staying Navy. Compares to some of our civilian, IBM to Apple, well, they don't have anywhere near the retention across 5-10 years that the Navy does. To the other unrestricted line communities, in the GAO study, it said that we retain the worst through 10 years of service. Well, that's absolutely true. We do, but we also have the smallest commitment. We're the only service that you can lateral transfer at the 2-year mark, and some people do, 2-3 years. The submarine communities, you're really committed to about 6 years of service, nuke school plus a tour, and aviation it's 6 to 8 years after pinning. So a little apples and oranges, but through department head, we retain better than submarine officers who, oh, by the way, make $1 million more in a career than we do. So, about a handful of percentage points. We do retain a little worse than pilots. However, again, they have that 10-year commitment, and there's a bit of a psychological thing. Once you get halfway done your career, think of getting done your department head tours, because that's really the same time place they are in a career, and saying, well, I'm just not going to stay to 20, even though I already did 10 years. So it's a little bit different there. But I think the bottom line is that we are retaining more officers today than we have in my entire career, and we are assessing a lot more women, about 3 times the amount of women than just 10, 15 years ago, and we are retaining them at a higher percentage. What would be my goal is that we close that gap between men and women. I want to see, a statistically, not to geek out, statistically insignificant difference between those retention points. What are some other things we're doing? The biggest thing right now we're trying to do is one about going to command. This isn't now even beyond staying in the Navy. I have discussion with female officers who screen for command, and we have that 4-year time period for family planning, a good solid time for family planning post-department head. But let's be realistic. You can't just say, okay, this month I'm going to get pregnant 9 months from now, and then that's not how it works. And sometimes you run into that XOCO tour. So we want to provide an opportunity for those officers to delay that 06 promotion, so that looking down, so we can delay when they get into XOCO to get a little more family planning time there. And we're asking Congress to give us the authority to do that. We're getting very positive responses, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get, Congress, it needs to be written into the National Defense Authorization Act. And that is in a little bit of response to the Command Career Intermission Program, which people may be familiar with. And the negative feedback I've gotten on a career mission program is, oh, so you want me to, I'm not of value to the Navy while I'm pregnant, so you want me to get out and do that on my own time, and then I can come back in. Certainly was not the message or the intent of that program. But we like the delay the promotion, give you more time for family planning, and stay on track option better.
I'd like to add one other piece, the diversity piece of it. I was really fortunate that on my first ship, my first commanding officer was a black man. And I didn't appreciate at the time that the mental model that provided, that I could do that. I didn't realize the significance of that then, but I do now. Now, of course, there still isn't enough diversity, particularly as we get more senior, but the fact that we recognize that there's a challenge there is the first step to addressing challenges and making things better. And we're talking about it. We're trying to, figure out ways to be better, to be more inclusive, to have more equity, so that when anyone looks up and out at, the leadership in our Navy, that they realize that there's someone they could be like. I often say when I'm mentoring some of my junior sailors, there's significance for when we land a brow overseas. When you land that brow, there are a couple of interactions that take place. There's a macro interaction, state on state, Navy to Navy, things like that, but there's a micro interaction as well that happens people to people. And so when someone on that pier can look up at that ship and see someone in a uniform that looks like them, we communicate without ever saying words that, hey, we value what you look like, we value your diversity, and we can understand you. And so you deepen that relationship. And that's what we do with our allies and partners, but we also need to do that inside of our own Navy as well. So we're looking at that and talking about it, and it's significant, and it just can't snap your fingers because it takes 27 years to grow a post-major commander. So
what we had, the one thing, the diversity, accession, and retention, I went to the ship selection last February again, and 35% of the officers walking across the stage were diverse officers. About 30% were women. 54% of division officers now today are either diverse or women. A sailor in the fleet is more likely to be led by either a diverse officer or a woman than they are a white male non-Hispanic officer. When it comes to retention of officers, diverse officers retain at a higher level than non-diverse officers. By about 3 percentage points diverse overall, and with black diverse officers, it's an even higher number of about 6 to 8 percentage points. So the junior officer, kind of the seed corn of the fleet is there. Now it's retaining and promoting and building the senior leaders that we want in the fleet, that have the diversity, equity, and inclusion that we desire for our Navy to represent the American people.
I think to get back to the question of why do people get out, one of the things that came out in the recent studies, and I went back and literally polled some of my previous JOs and their friends, is this the number of ensigns on the ship and the number and the opportunity that maybe provides or doesn't provide. So the dissatisfier perhaps of "I didn't have a real job" was one of the, I think, quotes that came through in there. So here's what I would tell the JOs. If you're going to be in a group wherever you go, right? Whatever profession you go to, if you're a doctor and you're going to go to residency, or you're a junior lawyer, or whatever that profession is, you're going to be in a group of people that are basically qualifying, getting their credentials, and then getting ready to move on in a career, right? So I don't think that experience is necessarily unique. I would also tell you that that's a very temporary condition. By the time you become a second tour division officer, you're getting billeted into an actual job, right? And you will no longer be in that role. As a department head, you have a real job. You have real responsibilities that are unequal to what your peers that get out of the Navy are going to have, right? So it's really just a few years down the road, and the level of responsibility, accountability, and job satisfaction that comes along with that, it's coming. It is absolutely coming. So take your early roles in the Navy, and the size of the wardroom. We probably need to look at some of those things. An opportunity for special evolutions, right? The MSTIC trainer that Lex's team is going to be running here, providing a great quantity of opportunities to cut skills in a virtual environment. So that I don't have a real job, that's a temporary condition. Don't allow that to cloud your view, right? Again, think about how you're developing as a person, what skill sets are you learning, because every profession goes through that period, right? The real hard work is coming, have no doubt. That real work is coming, and there's great satisfaction in doing that job well. Thanks.
I may not call it real jobs. I probably would prefer to say traditional division officer jobs. That we do have officers in the fleet that are not in traditional division officer jobs. However, I think people say, well, I'm the S1 division officer. And what I think when someone tells me S1, I might have liked to have had a time as an S1 division officer when I failed SMC when I was XO, because I just had no idea what was going on in the supply department. Because I will tell you, as XO, I could throw the flag on Chang, because Lex Walker taught me enough about engineering, and I could throw the flag on combat systems, but Suppo could totally snowball me if he wanted to. So I like to say traditional, and it really does get into a topic that we had discussed earlier, which is that it seems like one thing I get feedback on fairly consistently is that there are too many ensigns at sea. That we have 18 to 23 division first tour division officers on ships right now. And the bottom line, why is that? It's because we are building department heads for 2031 and a larger Navy, and we have the Navy of 2021 to train those future department heads on. So we've increased our accessions to meet the Navy that the nation wants to build a decade from now, but I have the hulls of today to train those officers on. And I don't send officers to ships that are going to be in long maintenance availabilities. So take those hulls off, and I don't send officers to hulls until after C-Squat. So the number of ships that are in pre-commissioning, in particular the number of LCS crews that we have that have not yet gotten to C-Squat, we have a lot of officers, and especially on deploying ships. So that is a short term. We will, we have a lot of LCS crews that are getting ready to do C-Squat, and we're going to start taking first tour division officers from the LPD, DDG, CGs and putting them onto LCS. So we're going to go from 6 second tour division officers on LCS to 3 and 3. That's going to reduce that. It's going to increase the demand signal across the fleet for first tour division officers, because those are traditional billets. And also something that Captain Walker and I owe to SWOBOSS is a study of tour lengths for first tour division officers, because 30 months is and was the right answer post 2017 for the amount of experience that a division officer needed in their first Divo tour to be a proficient watchstander. That was before Admiral Alexander and Captain Walker initiated the OOD Phase 1 and Phase 2. That is outstanding training.
Let me jump on that for just a second. One of the dissatisfiers are JOs. You show up to a ship and your UI, you stand under instruction for a long period of time, particularly up on the bridge. We have completely changed how we're training the JOs over the last 3 years. The ensigns showing up to the ships are better prepared to go aboard a ship than they have ever been before. And that's a lot of the work that Lex's team has done up there at SWAS in establishing first the JOD course, which is now morphed into the OOD Phase 1 course. And it is 6 solid weeks of learning how to stand watch up on a bridge. And I've told everybody who would listen to me, it's the training that I wanted 29 years ago. I can remember to this day showing up at USS Wabash, going up on the bridge, and the OOD telling me to do a contact report. 3.5 hours later, I had filled out the contact report and was ready to call the captain. Meanwhile, the ship, the contact of interest was long since over the horizon. The ensigns going through the OOD Phase 1 course are making hundreds of contact reports. They're learning how to use bridge equipment, so it's no longer on-the-job training. They're learning how to run a watch team, and they're learning how to practically apply the rules of the road, which can be very, very challenging, not just to JOs, but department heads, sometimes to XOs and COs. So they're showing up to their ship, they're better prepared, they're qualifying faster, which improves morale. You know, as we looked at the JOD course when it rolled out, we were looking at qualification times, and on the extreme end, ensign out in FDNF ship, qualified OOD in 4.5 months. All right? And I am completely confident that he knew what he was doing.
I think to try to, answer the question too from the enlisted side, right? And I think some of the same reasons of why people get out, the family aspects, right? The family separation has certainly a play to do in there. But I know for me, when I made the conversion from enlisted to officer, at about the 9-year point, part of it was I was looking for more opportunities, right? And I think this is true in our junior enlisted sailors as well as our junior officers is, this feeling of, okay, I've done this, I've got my initial qualifications, I've worked through all the PQS, and now what, right? What am I going to do more, or is it just going to be doing more of this over time, right? So what I would tell you is, if you look at what the Navy is doing from a budget and a futures perspective, there is a lot of new stuff that is coming to the Navy, and almost all of it is in surface warfare, right? When we talk about unmanned vessels coming that will be part of groups that will likely be controlled or interacting with surface ships, new classes of ships that are coming with different manning mixtures. I mean, even now LCS is a different training and manning structure than most of the other ships that we have. There's lots of new stuff coming. So if one of those reasons you're thinking about getting out is because of a lack of challenge, a lack of new opportunities, I would tell you that you need to really consider about where the Navy is going, right? The Navy 10 years from now is going to look drastically different than today's Navy when we compare today's Navy to 10 years ago, right? It is a very different set of skills that's going to be needed, and opportunities for people to just figure out how will we really use some of these systems that are coming to the fleet, right? We know conceptually that we want them, we know technically how we want to connect them, but we're not sure how we will necessarily employ them. That is going to come from you who are new in the Navy now, will be operating these systems as department heads, as commanding officers, as chief petty officers.
If I could add one other point, this is a why stay Navy panel, and we really haven't, answered that question. And I think, if you look at why stay Navy, how we would answer that, how I would answer that is oftentimes, if you put your money where your mouth is, that really shows what you care about. Over the past 10 years, through STAVE, Surface Training, Advanced Virtual Environment, what we're doing with the Maritime Skills Training Program, we've invested about $10 billion on the enlisted side and also with the Mariner Skills side as well. So we've put the money there to build the facilities, to modernize the training, and then inside the classrooms, it's one thing to just build a brand new building, but how we're teaching, science of learning, electronic classrooms, and all of these things that we're doing to provide the best training possible in the best environments to get after the threats and to get after the human component of it. So we're practicing what we preach and trying to say that we're investing in you, whether you're an officer or enlisted, because we're putting the money there and we're spending the time to train to the best of our ability.
So Kevin has talked a lot about some of the flexibility that he's bringing into officer detailing. You know, I won't get ahead of CNP and what he's doing, but there is an awful lot of thought on the enlisted side about adding some more flexibility, seashore rotations. What does that really mean? Ability to move into different skill sets and different platforms. So right now, I would tell you that your Navy leadership is thinking about, you know, how to respond to, after listening to the needs of what do we want to do, how can we go after different opportunities. There's lots of things coming. Again, even in the career path on the enlisted side, more flexibility, I think, is coming for enlisted sailors.
Do I see any hands up in the audience before we press on? Right here, please.
Lieutenant Suki, I'm the weapons officer for the Carlin 11. My question is more of a statement is, if you're looking at retention and why people are getting out, we're asking them when they're getting out, so you're always going to get the family, the money, the job opportunities, everything. Those are standard answers that you're probably going to get when people that are trying to get out of the military and before answers. But I'm going to go back to the COC that said about mentorship in the Navy. What I want to go back to is about mentorship in the Navy. Quick example for myself is on my first ship, right now, 3 of the 4 department heads are SEALs on the Waterfront. 11 of the 13 JOs that I work with are all department heads, they all went to MPS. And if you look at my last ship, I'm the only JO that went to the department head. Any one of the department heads are still in the Navy. So I think if you were to compare the mentorship, what I look to, what has impacted me was Captain Stebbins and Captain Lawrence and Captain Balls, the then Captain Alexander, that took the time to sit down, go through the career path, go through their leadership to make sure that those sailors, those officers have a plan. Same thing goes with enlisted. My senior chief has 20 sailors, 100% retention the entire time that he was on that ship. And if you look at my own division for my last ship, I had 50% retention for the same type of sailors. And I think a lot of it goes back to this mentorship involvement and ensuring that your sailors have a path to success when your officers are considering their career. You look at it by the time they're getting out, that you're missing a lot of information that you're not going to get from negative surveys. It's good to have those data points. It's good to have all the other factors that can help contribute to people understand the Navy and the career path and getting them into these programs and getting them more involved in that community. I think a lot of it goes back to having good mentorship programs.
Good, thank you very much. I think the gist of the question, and a very good one at that, gets to the responsibility for leaders to be mentors. And so the mentorship, whether at the senior level, i.e. the captain, or I believe you also even cited a senior chief as well, from whom very often we get a great deal of experience and wisdom, but it's the value of mentorship goes a long way toward helping an individual decide whether or not to, as the theme today says, stay Navy. So gentlemen, over to you for any comments in that regard.
So I'll answer that. And first off, great to see you again. I haven't seen you in the last 6 months. It is, you filled in as in our front office up at SWAS and did a phenomenal job, just jumped into a position and ran the SWAS front office during COVID. So thank you very much, and thanks for that question. So you're hitting on sort of a well-known issue. And Admiral Hunt, who's sitting back there, taught me one thing as an EA. And he said, successful ships are successful because they have great leadership. All right, and the converse is also true. Mentorship is part of that leadership. And it comes very naturally to the great leaders. And you see it sort of build upon itself, and you see the good ships get better and better and better because of the mentorship, sometimes formal, sometimes informal, but the ability to reach out, the ability to sit down with an officer or a sailor, make a difference in their life every single day. And what you're hitting on also right there is one of the reasons to stay in the Navy. I guarantee that if you choose to get out of the Navy, choose to go do something else with your life, you're not going to see that formal and informal mentorship, both above you and below you, that makes the Navy so successful.
So here's what I would say, and I thank you for bringing that up, that very personal aspect that I hit on earlier, right? So you kind of, if I heard you correctly, we're kind of telling the tale of two different ships, right? One where lots of people stayed in, lots of people were energized, lots of people went on to be successful, right? So from my department head time on Kearney, now Vice Admiral Boxall, 5 of the 6 department heads he had at one period all went on to major command, right? So you say, how does that happen? Well, he's a great leader. That's how it happens. And then sometimes people find themselves in the other side of the coin where they're not really getting that mentorship. So this is a challenge. Be the leader that you want to be led by, right? If somebody has taken some time to invest in you, stay Navy, because your ability to impact other human beings is real. It is positive. If you choose to spend the time with your sailors, right, whether that's a chief, senior chief, JO, captain, if you're spending time investing in your sailors, they're going to respond to that. You will have that opportunity at every step in a naval career to continue to reach out and to help other people along. If you're hardwired to help other people and to bring somebody else along into the position that you're in now, this is the organization that will never leave you wanting for an opportunity to help other people.
And I would offer, one of the hardest forms of leadership is peer leadership. And so there's an element to that as well. Kevin and I came from the same second tour department head wardroom together, where there was a real sense of esprit and camaraderie, not competition. And what that enabled us to do was grow and to influence each other, to lead each other, to develop each other. And then we could do that with our peers, with our subordinates, and even cross-pollinate. So if there were issues about operations that maybe as the chief engineer I didn't have a beat on, I would send them to Kevin, and he could lead and mentor, and vice versa. So it's not only up and down, but it's across as well.
Any other comments? Gentlemen. I saw another hand up, I believe. Did I not? Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Rick, please.
I just wanted to ask, on the study you mentioned your due out from the score loss and some of the great training that's happened, I just want to know in the context of other opportunities that the first tour division officer is going to be able to do, for example, either engineering or combat system additional watch qualifications, but maintaining the full 30 months would give that officer, because of the great training they would have had less, they now have more time to do other things to build those proficiency skills.
Okay, thank you. I think that was as much a comment as a question, but some helpful calibration with regard.
Take that into consideration, or just better training on whether the pipeline should be.
Okay, got it. The question has to do a little bit about pipeline, the great training that's being provided, and whether or not that's exactly taking hold. Is that
So I would,
Kevin?
Junior officers today are being provided better training, hands down, than I received in 6 months at Swastock as an ensign, which really was 11 weeks of Swastock and then some filler BST. It felt like to me to get to 6 months to justify a PCS move. The 30-month, the additional 6 months was specifically added post-collision because we needed more seamanship training. If we needed 30 months then, before we had this outstanding training, I firmly believe we need 30 minus something now. What that X is needs to be a data-driven decision based on the OD proficiency that Lex sees in his students. There is ample time in a 30-20 or 24-18, say, we'll just say, and I'm not saying that's the right answer, maybe it's 27-18, to still get the advanced qualifications, in particular engineering officer of the watch qualification. One thing I talk about when we talked about a lot of ensigns on the ship, I talk to commanding officers and say, okay, so how many of them are down in the plant? Because I firmly, like Admiral Alexander, and I think everyone up here, especially the former nuke MMC, believe that a foundation in engineering makes you a better officer of the deck, makes you a better commanding officer. And knowing that plant early was greatly benefited me. So there's time to get that EL, and in that second tour, time to get something, a warfare coordinator like qualification. Coming out of now, the ADOC training, where they are now doing dedicated tactics training prior to the second Devo tour. So I think that not only is there time if we take a little bit off take it off because they're getting outstanding A++ training at OD Phase 1, I think that time is there to get to gain the proficiency across all the requirements of surface warfare.
Yeah, and real brief, we ask our officers to do a lot. And there are a lot of career milestones that our officers have to get through to be sitting up here with these folks. And so freeing up even a few months can make a tremendous difference in flexibility that allows Kevin and his team to work through some of those career milestones. So SOBOS has essentially asked us to look at, hey, what's the right balance? We went to 30 months after the collision, because as Kevin said, we felt like we needed more underway time. Okay, we're given more training right now. Can we back off of that 30 months a little bit? So pre-decisional, haven't made a final decision, and we're working through it. What's the right mix of training? What's the right mix of underway time to free up some flexibility in a career path?
And certainly Admiral Alexander quite often asks me, how do we grow more warfare tactic instructors?
Yeah.
And part of that is if we get a little bit more time ashore between rolling from second Devo tour and having to report to department head school, I have more time to do many things, including have a WITI tour and perhaps graduate education in that same block.
Yep.
And then we send an officer to department head school who's a WITI, and has a grad ed, which is very popular with our post division officers.
Good answer.
I'm going to call an audible at this point only because, as we should have, we focused on why stay Navy. And maybe as the only one up here who's got a little bit of experience on the other side of that threshold, let me just take a minute to talk about what you might consider and or face should you choose not to stay Navy. And having been in industry now for 17 years, and again, I came in at a relatively senior point, but I work for a company that has actually eclipsed the size of the U.S. Navy, now 355,000 people. Needless to say, a company of the sort that I'm with is very heavy loaded at the junior end. And then it's a very significant and narrow sweep to the senior end. The bottom line is when we hire people at the junior end, they are not working 40-hour weeks. I would say on average it's 60 to 70. There are surges that make that even more. Weekends are not necessarily sacred. So we'll start with that. Number two, there's always the pragmatic questions about, well, I'm going to make a lot more money. There are those who are precocious. We read about them in the press, but the fact that you read about them in the press means that they are rare phenomena. The majority of individuals with your level of experience and or training and education will make decent compensation levels, but I would not suggest for a moment, frankly, that they will exceed what you get in the Navy. And remember, compensation is not simply the paycheck. The total package is what you've got to take a hard look at and compare. Benefits, whether it's medical or a host of other things which heretofore in uniform were pretty much taken for granted. That's not necessarily the case in industry. Variety. I know that it's common today for sociologists to suggest that the younger demographic is very fluid. They're in a job a year or two or three and they're off to somebody else. Well, to some degree within the Navy, you don't have to do that. Because what many of those younger people are seeking is an experience and variety. And I don't know about you, but in my 33 years, there was more than enough variety to go around in terms of a Navy career. And so while one might compare and say, well, we don't have that fluid movement in the Navy, that's not a very valid comparison, because in many cases, those who stay, especially at the junior levels, are really locked into a very narrow stovepipe to build their own personal reputation, their own brand, and their own level of expertise, which to some degree we do in the Navy. But there's nowhere near that opportunity for horizontal spreading of the wings to seek a lot of other opportunities. And so the bottom line is, you've got to be able to, whatever level you're at, take a very hard, unvarnished, open-minded view of what is on the other side of that threshold. Because I think it's very important that you crank that into your calculus as you make that decision. And I thought, while it was not something I wanted to do and take up valuable panel time, that is part of the conversation I think we need to consider based on the theme of today's panel. Are there any other questions from the audience? I'm going to ask each of our panelists to make one final comment before we wrap up. We've got about 6 minutes left. So let me go ahead and start with Captain Kennedy. Is there any loose ends that you'd like to cover?
I think I mean, and I'm thinking back to the GAO study and the tremendous conversation we're having around the GAO study, though it perhaps is, you know, it's difficult conversations to have. I think they are extremely valuable, and they're making us better, and that's what I think we all want, is to be a better organization, and certainly Congress exists to make us a better organization. So I thank you for the conversations we already had, and I look forward to more in the future. My email's in global, and and just from Monday I got a, you know, hey, I didn't want to ask this question in front of everybody, but, and I love to get those emails, and I always respond, and if there's any engagement like that, please let's have the conversation. Thank you.
Admiral?
So when we started off this panel, you gave the little blue story of why I stayed in the Navy. I want to walk through a couple of other reasons I chose to stay in the Navy, and some of them have been touched on. You just mentioned this one. The pay's pretty good. Pay is pretty good when you compare it to what people are actually making on the outside. The retirement benefits are amazing, out of this world, what you get in retirement, and you need to consider that as part of your calculus. The healthcare benefits are phenomenal. Even if you didn't have a retirement plan, it is worth it to stay in the military because of the healthcare benefits alone. And I would say that shouldn't be anybody's reason, but it should be part of your calculus. Travel opportunities are out of this world. I can say in my 28, 29 years, I have visited no less than 35 different countries. All right? I think many people out here could surpass that number easily. I have been to places that there are no possible way that you would ever go if you weren't in the military, and that's pretty cool. You get the opportunity to work with great people. I would put the folks that you're going to work with in the United States Navy above anybody else. You get a chance to do something important every single day and make a difference every single day. And finally, you get to be a chance to be a part of a phenomenal organization. Right.
I would just offer to everyone out there, as you think about your career and where it's going, all of us here are available to you. So if you've got something where you're scratching your head because you don't understand, or beating your head against the wall because you're frustrated because you don't understand, reach out. You know, there's a part of us that needs to reach down to you and facilitate those questions, but don't spend too long not understanding your environment without asking the question and asking for help or guidance. I echo what Kevin and Admiral Alexander said. It's a wonderful lifestyle. If you treat the Navy as a lifestyle and not just as a job, it will give back to you tenfold, and that's why I keep doing it.
Yeah, so, you know, I think a lot about family. So I've been married over 30 years to the same woman. She is a saint. 4 children, 9 going to 10 grandchildren here in a couple months, right? So I'm leaving them a better world than I got. My first deployment under the polar ice cap, tracking Soviet submarines, right? I felt like I was making a difference even though I was in the engine room. The world we live in today is increasingly more dangerous, and there are those who would seek to make it unstable. I'm going to make a difference with what I do, right? So JFK asked not what your country is going to do for you, but what you can do for your country. Those words are still true. You know, those were words spoken in the days of the Cold War when things were a little unsettled, and here we are again in 2021. The world is still unsettled. What are you going to do with your life? And I can tell you, I can promise you, that a career in the Navy, you can make a difference to other people, you can make a difference in your country, and you can leave a better world behind for your children and your grandchildren. Thanks.
Well, thanks very much, first off, to our audience today, both those of you who are alive in person as well as those of you also alive, I might add, but here virtually. Thanks to the SNA for sponsoring and particularly targeting this subject matter and allowing us the period of time you did to cover it. There's probably nothing more important to our seed corn than ensuring that we provide them the very best perspectives on why Navy is so important. And of course, lastly, to our distinguished panel, they were candid, they were straightforward, they shared an awful lot of personal vignettes which go a long way toward making very clear why they stayed Navy.